Hello, folks. Welcome back to Learn Synthesis with Ableton Live. I'm your host, Dr. Lawrence W. Moore of the Wayfarer Project. In this episode, we're going to be looking at a cool instrument in Ableton Live called collision. Collision is basically physical modeling for kind of percussion, but pitched, but it's a whole world of sounds that can be made with it, and so I can't really put it in a box. And it's a great instrument, so I'm really actually excited about this. But it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's just another approach to sound making that does involve physical modeling, where you have some sort of stimulator, and then you have a resonator. Basically, a stimulator in this case can be a mallet. Doesn't just have to be, but more often is like a mallet hitting an object that is the resonator that vibrates. That's an oversimplification, and you can actually tweak things a lot of different ways in collision, but it's like it's a different way of looking at sound creation, and I think it could open up a lot of creative possibilities for people. It's worked for me in not only working with percussion sounds, but also other types of sounds. So you'll see what I mean in a moment. Sorry if I'm bloviating here a little bit, but I'm just kind of like, revisiting this instrument, and I've really been enjoying it. So hopefully that enjoyment will carry over onto you. So here we go. Okay, so here's our baby, collision. And like the other instruments that we've covered, it has a very similar GUI. All the things in Ableton Live have similar GUIs, but this one works a little bit differently. And it can take a little bit of getting used to, so hopefully I can get you up and running with this great instrument a little bit faster. So we have our central viewport area here, and we have tabs. So when you click on different portions of the instrument here, it's not like the other instruments where they automatically shift the viewport to correspond with that area. In this instrument, it's the tabs up here that basically allow you to select different viewports. Over here on the left, we basically have our section for the stimulator part of this overall relationship here. Like here we have a mallet, very straightforward, a mallet hitting our resonator, which is a beam. And there's all sorts of parameters to that and ways of varying the sound that are just seemingly endless. But we'll look at that in a minute. I'm just trying to give you an idea of flow here. So we have our mallet. We can also stimulate the resonator with noise or use the noise and mallet together. We do have filtering here at this point that basically is filtering of what you're striking the resonator with, but you'll also hear that the sound of your strike also affects the resonator's emanation of sound. It's really cool. But you have here also resonator 2, and you could basically use them in a relationship where you're striking resonator 1, and that gets mixed down to mono, and then stimulates resonator 2, almost as if this is a midway point between the strike and the eventual destination resonator. Or they can be used in parallel, where it's almost like you're hitting two different things with the same mallet at the same time, or maybe two of the same mallet in either hand, and they're basically in parallel. So we'll look at those possible routings as we go on. Here we have LFO that, we've been talking about what LFOs are for our previous two instruments. And basically this is the same type of thing, except it can be routed. There's two LFOs, in fact, and they can be routed to two destinations each. And as we explore this instrument, we'll play with that and see what the LFOs can do. We also do have a MIDI and MPE, MIDI polyphonic expression tab, where you can say what your MIDI, standard MIDI, or MPE parameters are going to affect, all sorts of things. This is going to be a two-parter. I'd like to try and keep these episodes within about an hour, maybe a little over an hour at the most. In going through things ahead of time, I think I'm going to probably be, kind of in this episode showing you the lay of the land, how the interface works, playing with a few sounds a little bit, but mostly getting to know the instrument. And then in the second video that follows, episode 8 of series 1, we will make some sounds with it where we can get creative, and I'll show you some sounds that I make with them, and that I think are pretty cool. And actually in this episode you'll hear like all the varieties of things you can do, and it's all right. Then we have our almost like a master section where, depending on how you have your resonators set up, this can either control one of them going into the other, or this can control both, either one in parallel. So when we get to here, we'll see how whichever resonator we have selected and how we have it structured over here will affect how this area functions. But I guess what I should do is get to the basics first, and then we can get there, because right now describing it ahead of time without knowing some of the basics of the instrument is just not going to work out so great. So let's start here with mallet. You can turn it on or off, because you don't have to stimulate the sound with the mallet. It needs to be something, but you have mallet or noise. So let's take mallet here. Noise is off, so we're basically striking a beam with a mallet. Obviously a metallic beam. So you can hear different aspects to the sound. The key that I'm playing is playing the pitch that you're hearing as like the lower fundamental of the sound, and then we hear a higher pitched ringing of the sound. That ringing can be affected by a number of things, because this is physical modeling. It's saying, okay, if you're hitting this metal beam with a certain stiffness mallet that you see here, then it's going to have a certain frequency response in how it vibrates. And there's all sorts of other parameters. So let's start going through them. Like here, we have stiffness. That's like hitting it with a harder mallet, like maybe a hard glassy ball at the end, as opposed to like cloth. And here, like if you're hitting it with a cloth mallet, this also sounds a little bit like you're scraping it a bit too. There's a number of ways to kind of like coax parameters into shape and so forth. And like, say for example, you turn down the stiffness. Come on, actually do it. There we go. And you're hearing it as quieter. Well, that's what the volume here is for. To make up for your different adjustments. Like some of the adjustments that you make may become too percussive for you or too intense, and then you can turn down the volume here. All right, so let's just put it somewhere in the middle ground, 50%. Next, we have here noise, which is affecting that attack or that striking of the beam somewhat differently. It has still an effect on the frequency spectrum of the sound. Here we're hearing definitely a more hollow ringing sound ringing out, and then here brighter. But it's not going to sound exactly the same as the brightness change you hear from stiffness, because stiffness also still has brights on the lower end here, because it's kind of like a clothiness. Scraping the surface a little bit there as it's struck. So all these parameters give you different perspectives on the frequency spectrum of the sound. So it's good to play around with them and hear different things. And then color, when we turn it up here, now we're hearing a bit of a duller sound. And then a little bit of a brighter sound when we turn it down. So this might be something where, let's say we want a low stiffness. All right, and we still have a bit of bright to that sound. Let's say we want it to sound a little noisier. Now it's like a real harder scrape. And now let's say that's a little too bright, so let's dull that a bit. Let's say we like that, but it's too quiet now, so turn up the volume. That's a little too bright in my ears. I'm sorry if that's hurting you too. Oh man, you know, you can play with these parameters and just find all sorts of wonderful things, like hidden pots of gold here and there. All right, so there's our mallet section. Now I'm going to turn it off, play a key, and you hear nothing. I'm going to turn on noise, play a key, and we do hear something because now we have a different stimulator selected. So noise means kind of like it's not as defined of a thing as mallet as far as the striking element hitting the beam. You do have frequency control. So you could hear that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Not as much variety of approaching the spectrum as you do here with mallet, but it does sound like a softer type of an attack. And then there's a resonance to its attack. Now, all these colorings that we do here with either the mallet or the noise do also affect how this resonates out. There's certainly more parameters we're going to play with here in a minute for how this resonates, but we're basically striking this, and either with noise, kind of like in physical modeling, that would be like a difference between hitting something with a stick and maybe blowing on it or bowing it with like a bow. Those are common approaches to physical modeling, and so this noise is kind of like a bow slash blow type of attack on the sound. But as you see, it also affects what resonates afterwards. So you can think of it as the striker attacking the object, and then the combination of the object's properties and the striker's properties will affect the overall sound, but kind of like from different perspectives. And of course, you could do some crazy things that go beyond reality where, you know, you can make completely inventive sounds. So anyway, here we have a filter section. We have low pass, passing frequencies below a certain point, and attenuating or cutting off frequencies above a cutoff frequency. We've been working with those a lot. A high pass, a band pass, and then interestingly enough, a low pass, high pass together, which is kind of like a band pass, but I guess a wider area. Now, there is no frequency selector for the cutoff frequency. For low pass, high pass, they both have cutoff frequencies. Band pass, that frequency selection would be the center point of the band that you're passing. So really, this, you should think of it as like a whole spectrum thing. But what's happening is this filter is going across the spectrum according to an envelope that you set here over the attack, decay, sustain, release of the sound. Attack time, decay time, And sustain here, believe it or not, yeah, it is a level, but not in dB. It's in a percentage compared to the attack peak, and then a release time. These you do type in seconds, so if you want milliseconds, you type a decimal point. All right, so let's play with this a little bit here. Let's turn up the envelope amount all the way. This is basically how much the envelope affects your filter and its effect on the overall sound. So we'll turn this down in a moment, but we don't want to turn it all the way up just so we can hear it. So let's say our attack is quick, our decay time, let's make it 1 second so we can hear that portion. And then it's going to reduce in frequency. Now, this is, remember, not amplitude here. This envelope is governing the cutoff frequency of a low-pass filter. And basically, it comes in at 0 hertz, rises up to the full length of the spectrum, then backs, or the full, maybe like 20,000 hertz, something like that, allowing to pass the whole spectrum. Then it will decay down to about 50%. So your sustain is where you have some control over, I'm trying to set it to 50, some control over where the cutoff frequency is going to be. At the beginning, it's going to be 0, the beginning of the note that you play. Then it rises up to peak and then back down to the sustain. So here we go. Oh, for crying out loud. I'm sorry if I hurt your ears there. Volume here. You hear for the sustain portion, it's almost like we're rolling something to sustain the sound. So that's what's happening there. If we had mallet, let's see. And I'm going to just tap this key. Yeah, let's turn this down a little bit. Right about there. Now, the sustain ain't happening, because this is a stimulator that's more like blowing or bowing, and this is striking it with something, and so you can't sustain it unless you strike it again, and so forth. So wanted to point that out. So let's stay on noise here. Let's make this a slow attack, like 1 second come in, 1 second go up, drop down. Basically, we're going to hear a rise in pitch, allowing basically the filter rising, allowing the full spectrum of sound in, and then reducing down to about 50% of the frequency spectrum for the sustain portion. And then when we release, it will fade out over, let's make it another second so that we can hear it. Yeah, I'll tell you when I release again. Decay down to sustain, and now I'm going to release. There we go. So as you see, it's more than just hitting things. It's more than just collisions. Yeah, it's a wide variety of stuff you can do with this. Let's hear the opposite, a high pass. So now it's going to basically start off passing the whole frequency spectrum, decay, and over the slope of the attack, it's going to go down. And then it'll rise up to the sustain level. So let's hear that. So you heard that kind of like starting off with the full spectrum coming through. Then you hear the cutoff lower down over the decay portion to the sustain level, and then you can release from there. So it's just an inverse shape there. And then we have band pass. Let's hear that. So it's passing a certain band. I don't know. You could probably find out somewhere how wide that band is. but 50% here is probably width. Try 25. Yeah, you could get some really delicate sounds with this. And then there's the low pass, high pass, which I guess really means a band pass, but with a wider. And yeah, when we get to the sustain portion, I can definitely hear that's the case. I'm sorry, some of these may be a little bit delicate, and that's why I got all these volume knobs to kind of adjust based on how you set things to get your leveling right. Yeah, it's probably best to hear this on headphones as usual with anything that's synthesis or sound design oriented, so you can hear subtle differences. Until I blast you. I'm sorry, I really try to avoid that. Okay, here we have our resonator section. So we've been working with a metal beam at this point. And this section has a orange locator that you can click on and move around. But really what it is like an X, Y grid for these two parameters. X, in this case, being decay, and Y being material. And so if we go left horizontally, we can hear how it sounds now. Basically what it's doing is it's actually shortening the decay. But the thing is, we've affected things here with this envelope. So I am going to make this envelope quicker so we can hear a difference in the decay a little bit more clearly. I mean, it's still there, but it's harder to hear because I have this taking so long as an envelope. 0.2. 0.2. That's still almost half a second of sustain there. Set at 50%, and I'm going to put it on a low pass. And then the release time, we could have that be 0.2. Now I'm just flicking the key. So you can see it's not ringing out. Go over here. Now it is. So that decay is left to right X coordinates. And then up and down, or Y coordinates, is material density. That is kind of like making it a denser material, so it vibrates less, doesn't ring out as long, but it's a different type of time factor for ringing out than the decay. That really sounds like almost like a reverb in the kind of like rooms attributes to it. And this sounds more like, you know, the denser something is, the sooner any sound vibrations in the material are going to die off. There we go. I am going to adjust these again and get it more towards something more conventional. Let's see, 0.01. How about that as an attack time? And 0.02, and release time can be that long. That's fine. Now we have more of an attack again. This filtering really is important when you're using the noise as your attack, or your striker, so to speak. And then we can even add mallet. So we have both striking techniques being employed here. I'll make the release a little bit quicker. 0.1. Oh, actually, yeah, this is what's ringing it out here, the decay. But remember, the sustain is thanks to having the noise here. and having a setting here. If this was at 0, we wouldn't even get to the release portion of the envelope. At least I don't believe so. Let's put it at 0. Yeah, we just have our attack and decay. I'm still holding the key, in fact. Now I'm going to release it. Yeah, and since it's at 0 already in the sustain portion, the release doesn't give you anything. Let's put this back at 50%. All right, here, a few more parameters. Bright. Yeah, got into dog range there. Yeah, basically pure emphasis in the frequency spectrum. There's so many ways to affect the frequency spectrum of the sound here, but they're all a little bit different based on the physical properties that are being manipulated. Here it's just a pure, kind of like turning up the brightness on an EQ almost. Well, or at least moving the frequency across an EQ, frequency of emphasis. And then here we have harmonics. So across the frequency spectrum, you could select an area of harmonic to stand out. So it's like a way to emphasize a part of the frequency spectrum as like a tonal area, as opposed to just really turning up like a band of frequencies. So it kind of contributes to the ringing of the sound. All right, and then ratio we have to use on a different resonator. So when we get to it, I'll use that. Here we have marimba. Supposed to be more like hitting like a wooden block. Although in the higher frequencies, well, the main thing is we're going to do away with this. Let's go back to mallet. A little too bright to sound truly like a marimba, but the thing about this is you can change parameters and, you know, completely distort, stretch things to different extents that are super unrealistic, but maybe beautiful sounding. Let me get this. There, it actually sounds like noise. Let me turn down the brightness. But then it sounds very chiffy with noise. Well, my stiffness is down all the way too. That didn't sound good. Still a little bit of high-pitched ringiness that is not so much marimba-like, but you could keep tweaking and get there. Oh, hold on, had it. Turn that color all the way up. There, that's closer. But you don't have to make it sound like a marimba just because you're selecting marimba here. This really just means like a wooden block that vibrates pitch. And let's see here. We have string. So the resonator there is supposed to be more like a string than anything else. And in the diagram, it's kind of like strings between two fixed locations, you know, like the strings inside a piano or strings inside a harpsichord or something like that. Although it's not specific to an instrument, it's more like just the concept of a string being vibrated by a mallet, but being forced to actually happen, you know, which let's see what we can do here. Yeah, in the next episode, I'll go over some sound types. We'll actually try to make a harpsichord or try to do this, that, and even some wild things that don't really exist but sound cool. All right, membrane. Now, membrane typically means like a skin stretched over a drum. And that's true here, but depending on how you have your parameters set, it could sound like a steel drum, in which case it's a metal. But there is also a plate option in this list. Now, the membrane allows us to do a little bit of something. Since we are steel drum here. Yeah, that sounds better. We now can use ratio to better effect. Or actually, it works now because it's mostly for the plate and the membrane. And yeah, here it this in the description says it's altering an XY location over the layout of the membrane, but it doesn't diagram it here because this is really decay versus material, not really a location. But as I hear it, sometimes to me it sounds like there's like two resonating membranes and it's changing the tuning of the two. Or in the case if this were a steel drum type of head, the tuned areas, the different tuned areas that you strike to play different notes, have this habit of vibrating each other. So that's why it always sounds very ringy, a steel drum, because the different positions across the top, the head, are tuned to get to different pitches. And then the fundamental, or that pitch, does stand out above the others, but the others kind of vibrate too, and that's what gives it its unique sound. But you could do this also with the plate. Like there, it sounds like two very separate things. And then refining them more into one where I hear kind of like one pitch and then another one, a second one like this resonating above it. I mean, there's so much to play with this. That it's, I mean, you could have hours of fun. All right, so let us also then pay homage to the fact that we also have a second resonator. I'm going to simplify things. And the quickest way of doing this is I'm going to delete this. And add another collision. I hope I've been calling it collision this whole time, because sometimes I have this bad habit of calling it collider. All right, so there we go. We're back to, now you hear this mallet, this beam, simple sound. Whoa. Okay, let's say that's our sound. We can turn on resonator 2 by hitting the square there. And then we can arrange it in any number of ways. And that goes along with this section over here. Just to say, like, when you start a different resonator, if you want to start from the same point, see here, this is 2 goes to 1. That means we would be copying the setting here to 1. We didn't do it yet, but let's say we want to copy 1 to 2. Now what we have is a mallet striking resonator 1, and then resonator 2 is going to function in one of two ways. Here with this top one, this 1 greater than sign 2 really means 1 into 2. what happens is the mallet or noise portion, depending on what you're using, or both, only affects resonator 1. And then that overall sound then stimulates resonator 2. So it's almost like one inside the other. But if you select this, 1 plus 2, then resonator 1 and resonator 2 are both being struck by a mallet or noise, and they're existing side by side. So we're going to go with that. And since I copied them, saying 1 copied to 2, they're both the same sound. Let's make 2 sound a little different by turning up its harmonics. But it's hard to tell which is which right now, because they're really mixed together. Now this section here, we have pan. If I click 1, pan it left, and click 2, and pan it right, resonator 2 that has this upper harmonic that I added to it. Oh no, wait a minute. I added that to 1. So 1, which is panned left, should have that upper harmonic on it. Now hold on here. I'm on 2. Yeah, I do hear it. It's subtle, but I do hear a brighter little ringing out sound on the left side. Oh, once again, these episodes are probably best heard using headphones or good speakers. And if they are spaced apart, that's best. Otherwise, you're not going to hear stereo too well. Especially if this is a built-in speaker on a cell phone, you're not going to hear that because the speaker, the left and right speakers are like right next to one another. So anyway, yeah, so when you click on resonator 2, the pan and the gain, this is how you can balance the two, affect resonator 2. And then you put it over here on resonator 1, then this pan and balance affect that. Now, if you switch this over here, 1 into 2, resonator 1 becomes mono. And so this doesn't matter anymore. Well, I guess it does. It made it mono and on the left, and then the stereo stuff is coming out the right and really ringing out there. So it looks like the pan still affects it. The description said that it makes it mono and then puts it into 2. But I'm still hearing like a dry left and then a ringing out on the right, like the decaying material really ringing out on the right, because I have resonator 1 panned left and resonator 2 panned right. And then let's take resonator 1 and its center, put them together again a little bit. But that's a loud ringing out there, a loud wetness that has gone beyond resonator 2's decay. And so that's kind of like what it explained, is when you're using this mode, it's almost like it wettens up resonator 2. And it does so to this degree here with voices. You see how it's set to 4? I set it to 2. It's less thick. I set it to mono. Less thick, but it's still ringing out. And now we added a snap to it. But over here, the structure kind of affects how they relate to one another. I'm going to go back to 1 plus 2. Because I find it harder to control that wetness when one's going into 2. By tweaking parameters, remember resonator 2 in that case is receiving from the strike of resonator 1. And the more you attenuate things here a little bit, the less it will be ringy and so forth. But as you hear now, we're hearing resonator 2 in parallel. We didn't change its parameters, but it's ringing out a lot less. So it's adding an extra degree of wetness when you do that other structure. And for me, yeah, this, well, actually, let's do this. Yeah, the volume can be useful here in attenuating that a bit. Okay. So there we go. Let's go back to this structure. 1 plus 2. Alrighty, so tune. We kind of skipped over this. It's just like it sounds. It does what it says on the tin. 0 semitones. Basically, you can pitch shift up the amount of semitones you want, or down the amount of semitones you want. I am going to say 7 semitones. And then we're going to click here. And you see it's at 0 semitones, so resonator 2 is now pitched up compared to resonator 1 by a perfect fifth. Alrighty, and then we do have here fine tuning that's within the semitone. But you turn it up all the way, you see it goes to 50 cents. Slight shifts in pitch. I almost wish it would go up to 99 cents at least, so you get all the full way within a semitone. Because cents divides a semitone up into 100 slices, and 100 cents would be 1 semitone in that direction that you go. And so it'd be nice to be able to do more than 50 and maybe get up to 60, 75 cents, whatever. Bend it a little bit more. So there is a certain degree of detuning that you can't get to. So anyway here, pitch envelope, this is the amount. Well, actually, the frequency of a pitch shift that you can apply to the beginning of the sound. For example, if I turn this up, you hear whatever resonator I'm on 2, is now pitch shifting down from an upper position because I turned this up. And it's going to do so over this amount of time, 100 milliseconds. And then we could scoop upwards. I was testing something there. You hear it when you play a note, but if you're holding that note down and play the next note, you'll only hear it if the first one's kind of like decayed away. There, you hear the 2 notes. You hear the first one scoop, and then the second one doesn't. It kind of comes right in at it. So that's just something to be aware of when using this. I'm going to put this at 0. When it's zeroed out, it doesn't matter if milliseconds are set. Oh, and then the blend. I think we need to go back here for this. All right, now we're going 1 into 2, but it is definitely less intense than it was. Of course, we are on mono, and I did turn the volume down before. The blend, I read the description, it's something like, as like a compensator, that if you're losing some high frequency material, it's a way of kind of gaining it back when you do a certain thing. And just kind of click on it and read the jazz in the lower left hand corner on your own, but I've never really used it. Hold on, where is my mouse? Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, if you hold down Or just hold the mouse cursor over anything in the lower left-hand corner. It gives you help and so forth. But yeah, I didn't really find a need for it. But in any case, finally, let's go over here to LFOs. We can turn on LFO1. Got to do that first. Offset is kind of like a shift in position that you can see graphically displayed there. It changes the beginning and the end of a phase of the cycle of the waveform, because depending on what you're sending this to, you may only hear one cycle or a part of a cycle. Here are the destinations. The same LFO can be set to multiple locations, but you have differences in amount that you can set. So let's find something that we can actually hear. Now, we don't have much sustain, do we? Well, let's see what parameters we have here. Depending on what it is, we may... Yeah, it should sustain enough that... Oh, okay, we could do note frequency. Now, I'm wondering... Let's turn it up to 100%. Oh, that's noise frequency. Excuse me, we don't have noise on. Do we run noise? No, let's select something else. I'm sorry. Kind of, my eyes blurred there. I thought it said note. Noise volume. No, we're not using it. Mallet stiffness. Well, the thing about this stiffness is it is kind of like an attack, a strike. And how many wobbles of the LFO are you going to be able to hear while that's happening? What you might hear is different stiffnesses with each strike. Let's try that. I'm not hearing it vary too much at all. But yeah, I mean, I really wanted to select something that we'd really be able to hear a bit better. Resonator 1 pan. Okay. So we'll hear our one resonator pan left and right now. But as this doesn't have a lot of sustain to it, we're not hearing it go out long enough to pan left, right, make it more noticeable. Let's increase its decay. There we go. Now, a lot of that is also going to be down to its rate, and we can set shape, and this amount is really to what degree it affects this. It's almost like the vertical aspect of the waveform, so how much it shifts up and down, and in panning here, that's how far it shifts pan left and right. Let's put it on 50%. So it's doing it to a lesser degree. And this would be offset, like where it starts. Maybe we could start it somewhere in the middle. So it's going like right, left, and so forth like that. Now, the rate, I don't see any place where you can directly set it in here, but I'm pretty sure we can. And we'll go through this next time in the second video. But modulation wheel. LFO1 rate. So now on my keyboard, I'm going to turn up the modulation wheel. Now it's faster. And I could probably make it even faster by increasing the amount here. And then I'm reducing the modulation wheel. So, I mean, other things you could do is there are other MIDI parameters that you could have affect this. Pitch bend, I'd prefer to keep that on. Pitch bending, and we do have note pressure here. And then there is even a slide setting. But over here, we do have key and velocity. Velocity maybe be more appropriate. How quickly you hit the key, you can have it affect. LFO1 right here, the rate or the amount. And then, there's all these other settings. So, you know what? I don't think I'm going to need to go through. Well, what I'm going to do next time is in designing sounds, we'll use some of these MIDI parameters in doing that. So that way we can go through them a little bit more. But at least there you see, the ways of doing things. But it doesn't have its own. It does! Look down below. It does have a rate setting. Oh my goodness. And you can have it set to hertz or your clock and a time interval. I mean, your click, basically. But here, when you're on this, you can set the division of the beat. At this point, it'd be 1/6. Interesting. It divides it up more than just the quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and so forth. So you can get polyrhythms. So anyway, I think there we go. I think this is a good place to stop since we did a tour of the instrument. People could play with it on their own and all that sort of thing. And next time I'll make a few sounds with it. Some things maybe one or two conventional sound types, and then a couple of explorative ones, because I've used this before to make some pretty cool, like alternative drum tracks. Not alternative as a genre, but just avoiding being a drum kit and having some pretty cool sounds that are also pitched, as you can tell. You can also make them non-pitched or less pitched. The more you implement noise, and I heard the filtering allowed us to sustain and really kind of like a lot of variations. So you can make a lot of different things. It's a very powerful instrument. So let me take a snapshot. And I'll say thank you for joining me. If you found this to be valuable, useful, or entertaining in any way, if it helped you sleep at night, please hit that like button. Any questions, please drop them in the comment section, or just a hello to keep me from being so lonely. But until next time, take care and stay free.